Hey book readers, it's monthly rewind time. In September I tackled classic sci-fi and fantasy books, time travel stories, an award-winning juvenile novel, a book by a member of Monty Python, and more. So here's the traditional part of my content calendar where I chat about the novels I liked or didn't like this month. First up is Dragon's Egg by Robert L. Forward. This book blew me away. I mentioned in my recent book haul video that I bought a physical copy of it halfway through reading this ebook, because I realized that it was just going to be a 5-star read for me, no questions asked. It's a slow, hard sci-fi that covers a vast scale of time in a quick, efficient way. You get to see the rapid transformation of an alien creature or alien race called the Chila, and they're about the size of a mustard seed. They're itty-bitty, teeny tiny, and because they live on this neutron star where gravity is just so powerful that it crushes pretty much everything. In the book you get two perspectives. The first, of course, is the human perspective as the novel starts when humans discover this neutron star and eventually realize that there's life on it. Then you see the alien perspective. You witness the Chila civilization rising in knowledge and technology in the span of a few hours due to their fast-paced lives. The Chila also see these bright lights in the sky that they come to understand more and more over the course of the novel. And it's this back and forth between humanity and the Chila that creates a really fascinating relationship between the two species. It reminded me a bit of the Bobiverse in a way, because there's a segment in those books where Bob is following, or some version of Bob is following aliens gaining greater intelligence, but this, in Dragon's Egg, happens at a lightning clip. And like I said, this was for sure a 5-star read for me, and it's gonna be one of my top reads in 2024, no doubt. Like I said in the other video, if this had a different name, instead of Dragon's Egg, it would have been probably a beloved classic. The title really doesn't help sell it. It's confusing because this isn't a fantasy and it doesn't have anything to do with dragons. Up next is The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. This was the first book by Le Guin that I've ever read, and it convinced me to read more of her stuff. A guy named George Orr realizes one day that his dreams become reality, and only he notices the changes that are taking place. So he has the power to change the world through his dreams, but he's afraid to sleep because obviously he can't control his dreams. This leads to him being placed in the care of Dr. Haber, a well-meaning but power-hungry psychiatrist. Things quickly get out of control as Haber takes advantage of George's ability by manipulating his dreams to try and create this utopia. Haber wants a world without racism, poverty, and all the other stuff he deems bad. But the world only seems to get worse and worse with every change that Haber tries to make. It kind of follows the trope of genies not granting exactly the right wishes that you want. The vaguer Haber is with his directions, the worse the outcomes. I gave it 4 stars. It's a neat combo of sci-fi and psychology that explores different versions of Earth, but it made me anxious since the results of Haber's meddling compound over time. It's like you're in a minecart on a downhill slope pretty much the whole time with no chance of pulling the lever to stop the cart. Basically, you're as frustrated as George Orr at his inability to stop Haber from wreaking havoc. Another book I read this month was I Rode a Horse of Jade White Milk by Diane Lee Wilson. I've been going back and reading some nostalgic books that kids in the 80s and 90s loved, but they're ones that I never actually read when I was younger. And now that I have read this one, I can see what all the fuss is about and why it won several literary awards. Set in 14th century Mongolia during the reign of Kublai Khan, this book features a teenage girl named Alyuna. One of her feet was crushed by a horse when she was young, but she refuses to let this physical limitation and her reputation as cursed hold her back. And her big dream, the big thing she wants to accomplish, is that she wants to win this local horse race, and by doing that she's hoping that it'll bring good luck to her family. But of course first, she's gonna need a horse. This courageous girl soon has an adventure that includes bonding with a white mare named Bayan, riding with the great Khan's cavalry in a Mulan-like switcheroo of she's a girl but people may think she's a boy, and then also she's gaining trust in her skills and abilities. This was another really good read. I gave it 4 stars. The author's detailed writing about the setting, the Mongolian steppes, is just breathtaking. You really feel transported back to that time and place. that was probably my favorite part of this book, how real the scenery feels. And since it has a strong teen girl as its lead and a touch of magical realism, I think this one is one that I'd suggest to my 7-year-old daughter and hope she enjoys it just as much as I did, and I would suggest it to you as well. Next up, I read Dragonflight by Anne McCaffrey. This is the first book in the Dragon Riders of Pern series, a classic fantasy series that's beloved by its fans. And even though it speeds along at a really fast pace, it was tough for me to get into this one. Sort of felt like I was reading Shakespeare with the high fantasy names and writing style. It felt outdated. It screamed 1960s to me. Anyway, the setting is Pern, a world where humans and dragons form this unique bond to defend against some planet-devouring things called threads. And the main attraction is this relationship that's formed between the main character Lessa and her queen dragon named Ramoth. As they fight to protect Pern, there are dragon battles in the book, there's some attempt at a love story, and a bit of time travel even? Basically, it builds up really quickly and just kind of ends. I know it's a series, but it was super abrupt. And that's why I only gave it 3 stars. I thought the world and the Dragon Riders would be enough for me, but it all felt pretty flat. Everything was just kind of surface level. The characters, the action, the romance, as if the author quickly penned this book in order to just move on to the book number 2 in the series. I appreciate Dragonflight as a fantasy grandfather of modern epics, but it's the kind of grandfather who offers his grandchildren sugar-free Werther's candies. It's nice in theory, but just okay when you actually experience it. Another book I read this month was The Man Who Folded Himself by David Gerald. And I talked about this one in my time travel video from a week ago, so I won't go back over everything. You can get more of my thoughts there, of course, if you want. This was a 4-star read for me that was basically about the consequences of our decisions. It follows a man named Dan as he inherits a time travel belt, and then he has a classic exploring history's greatest hits montage. He tests out some time travel theories, and then he kind of comes to terms with questions about free will and his ability to influence the world around him. And it does get pretty weird as he crosses paths with his past and future selves, but overall it was an interesting examination of these what-if time travel scenarios. Another book I read in September was Hawksbill Station by Robert Silverberg. I also mentioned this book in my recent time travel video, so I won't spend a lot of time on it here either. I gave it 4 stars. It's a character-driven time travel novel focused on how a time travel machine might be utilized. And in this book, it's used as a prison. Yep, political prisoners are sent back 1 billion years into the past. It's there where we meet Jim Barrett, and he's the unofficial king of this prison, which is called Hawksbill Station. And he's been stuck in the past 1 billion years back for 20 years. In addition to exploring how being stuck in this timey-wimey prison is driving most of its prisoners crazy, we see the sequence of events that led to Jim being sent there. Then a new mysterious prisoner shows up, and while Jim starts showing him the ropes, he realizes that this new prisoner is different somehow. But what does that mean exactly for Jim and the rest of the prisoners at Hawksbill Station? You'll have to read to find out. Next up, I read Creativity by John Cleese. This was an extremely short novella written by one of the members of Monty Python, the classic British troupe. In it, Cleese muses about what he's learned about creativity over the course of his career. Firstly, it's something that can be taught and improved upon. It's not just something that you're either born with or you're not. Then he talked quite a bit about the conscious and unconscious brain, really letting yourself relax and play and realizing when it's time to focus and when it's time to let your mind wander and how you can get the most out of those 2 different situations. It does feature a few quick tips on how to harness your creativity, but nothing that'll really make you drop your jaw in surprise. I gave it 4 stars. It's a simple, fun read that doesn't have anything earth-shatteringly new in it, but it's presented in an entertaining way. It's a good read for anyone who does, any job or task where you need to kind of think outside the box. And last but not least, I read Sea Monsters by Chloe Aridas. I was sold on the premise of this book. 17-year-old Louisa and her friend Tomas search for Ukrainian dwarves who disappeared from a circus. And it was sold to me as a coming-of-age story with kind of a musical 1980s feel. Unfortunately, it didn't quite live up to that billing. 3 stars, it puts the meh in mediocre. Mediocre, I guess. For the most part, this book was more about the dreamlike vibes and Mexican landscape than the story. And since I recently visited Mexico City, I was able to recognize some of the places and neighborhoods mentioned, which was neat. And really, the author's writing style is what made me keep reading until the end, even though I wasn't remotely into the plot, which is aimless and not cohesive at all. It's a patchwork of things that happen to the main character as she kind of sort of goes on an adventure away from home. Bottom line, I probably wouldn't waste your time reading this one. There you have it, my September 2024 Reading Rewind. Let me know which pages you've been turning lately. And anything especially good, call it out in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Happy reading.